I don't know if I've ever talked about this before online, but I have this kind of theory going, and I think, it kind of makes sense. It's not obviously soundproof, but I think it's pretty unlikely, and unless someone acts against their best interests, that we're ever going to see two major superpowers engage in, standard warfare as we've seen in the last, like, human history, I should say. And this is kind of topical because of all that's going on in Ukraine right now and all the, the memes online you see about how we're definitely going to enter World War III and all that kind of good stuff. And let me explain what I'm trying to say. So ever since, the end of World War II, when, atomic bombs were created, and then after over time, a lot of countries and now most superpowers have access to, nuclear weapons. And it's at a point where if we were to launch all of them, we'd be able to destroy the world more than 1x, which you don't really need it to be more than 1x, right? After that point, it doesn't matter the multiple. It could be, you could destroy the world 100x or 2x, same deal, right? The idea is that if a major superpower with nuclear capabilities was to attack another one straight on, directly, then, if you do kind of the game theory and you do the little plot, right? If we're going to have a 2 by 2 plot, and let's have superpower A and superpower B. And on one side, it's launch nukes, yes, no, right? If any of them says yes, the other one will retaliate. If they will like send a counterstrike, and then everyone launches all their nukes. So every corner of this 2 by 2 grid is going to be mutually assured destruction, except for the one where they both say no. So obviously, right, I'm not implying that war is over. That'd be ridiculous. But I think it's fair enough to say that assuming that nations act with their best interest, that they will not launch nukes. I think that's assuming they act within their best interests. And maybe they don't, and you can't be based on that premise anyway. If they don't care, which may be some nation like North Korea, maybe, but I'd even say North Korea will never launch their nukes or their one shoddy nuke that doesn't work because it's the only leverage they have on the political, like, global scale, whatever, right? I will say, though, this does not mean that you won't see more proxy wars. Think about the Cold War. The same thing happened. Yeah, there were a lot of close calls. That's 100% for sure. But I think especially now, it's just like almost if we didn't all die in the Cold War to nukes, I think it would have been much more likely then than in the future. I'm not saying it's impossible. But if you think about think about all the proxy wars that happen. If you don't know what a proxy war is, it's essentially two bigger players using another country, funding either side of some kind of civil war that's going on in a country for their own kind of mini game, to kind of attack the other person without doing so directly, which would prompt probably full-on warfare, which would not be good. And I think, as well as like a proxy wars, which are kind of like old fashioned, I think a new type of warfare that has been done quite a bit, but has not really been outlined with like global conventions or laws or anything, or at least not to the extent that it really should. I think a lot of things with technology, the laws that try and, contain them they lag very far behind. So I think we're going to see more cyber attacks, more cyber warfare. I mean, you saw it, like, I think several months ago, or maybe it's last year. At this point, the news kind of blends together for me. It was a independent group. I don't think it was state sponsored, but an independent group hacked into a power grid or a power supply or a water supply. I think that, infrastructure in the United States is very behind par. And I think that's very possible that, I don't know, nations, China, Russia, they already have kind of hooks into our infrastructure system, and they're kind of waiting to use it for leverage if need be. I think that you've seen it for a very long time. I mean, in 2011, you have Iran and the centrifuges. If you want to look up Stuxnet, I mean, we didn't say we did it, but come on, man. We don't have to write on the code, right? Like // the United States did this, motherfucker. We don't need to say that, right, to say that we did it. But I think, honestly, that's probably going to be the future of warfare. Of course, if there are nukes involved, then yikes. But hopefully, right, the good thing about nukes is probably it prevents nukes from being used. But maybe not. The world's complicated.